this is it. Make sure you can see that. It does feel very light, it's very small. It's in a pretty roomy bag. That's important to scale that. Hopefully you can read that from there. 446 grams, obviously with the stuff sack. So without the stuff sack, it is 434, so about 12 grams heavier than they say on their website. Okay. Don't know if you can hear me, but I'm going to pitch this and then we'll talk about it in a bit. Okay, so sorry about all the time delay there, but at a push, you can fit with a pretty low pitch 2 25-inch pads in there. So at the moment they are head to toe, so that's obviously going to be a little annoying if you're a couple, but it's actually not a bad fit. There's still more bathtub, probably, you know, realistically maybe 3 inches of bathtub. I'll show you the other side. It's not too bad. It's yeah, maybe not 3 inches, but it's definitely going to be a push. But you could probably get away with an even lower pitch than this. This is still about 120 centimeters, but I have dug it into the ground a little bit and spread them a little bit wider. So not too bad. I'll show you inside. She'll come in from the other side. You're definitely going to need to spread these out to give you as much headroom as possible. Let's try and jump in. So same rainbow zipper. Okay. Now, hopefully you can hear me okay. I am 6'2", and you gotta stay outside, buddy. You gotta stay outside. You just gotta stay out there because you've got big claws. You've got big claws. So as you can see, it's not bad. Even my peak isn't hitting the top of the tent. And with shoes on, I haven't actually put the mat properly under my feet, but there's still plenty of room for my feet. Most of the mat I've put up behind me just because I am using the other mat next to me. It is definitely a squeeze with 2 25-inch pads, but even if you had one 25-inch and one 20-inch, I think it would work fine. Feature-wise, this is basically just a duplex without any pockets. They've really stripped back everything. The floor is 0.75, I believe it's ounces per yard, but the important metric is just the 0.75 because normally it's a 1 ounce floor. So this is 75% as thick and strong as the old floor. The roof is still 0.55 denier, or sorry, ounce per square inch. So it's basically the same roof as all of their lightest weight regular tents, but with a 75% lighter weight floor. Interestingly, the triplex that I have, I opted for the slightly heavier roof surface, which is the same as now my floor of this new tent. So it is very thin feeling, but still feels very waterproof, very plasticky of course. But this is a good fit. My main issue with getting this tent was I actually came from Durston X-mid Pro 1, which I found to be just too narrow. It's a beautifully constructed tent. With all the welded seams, it's probably the best tent as far as construction and design on the market, but I just wanted a bit more width. This tent is actually about 40 grams lighter than, and it's technically a 2-man, 40 grams lighter than my first generation X-mid Pro 1, which was about 480 grams. This is 423 grams. That's both just the tent for those two weights. Okay, we're back in the house now, and I just want to sum up a couple of things that I didn't mention about this new tent. One of them is, it was actually slightly lighter when I reweighed it. I think it's 434 grams with the stuff sack now, once I recalibrated my scales, and I think that's about 7 grams less than that once you take off the stuff sack. The other thing was that this cord is 1.3 mil instead of the 2 mil, so they lightened the load a little bit there. I think they seem to have also changed the little load locks, line locks I should say. I was worried that the load on that, if they didn't change the line locks from the 2 mil ones that they normally use on their tents, that it just might fail under high wind, but we'll see how that goes. They do seem to hold really well. I'm guessing they wouldn't have skimped on that. I think from what I've read online is that they're planning to do the light version of a few more of these tents, particularly the Ultraplex probably, and maybe the Soloplex as well. As it stands, this tent is, I think, only 1 ounce heavier than the Soloplex. So for essentially a 2-person tent, and my partner's very skinny. She likes the wide mat, but she genuinely doesn't really need it. But I think if you put a 20-inch pad next to a 25-inch pad, you would fit quite easily. Obviously, if you're used to having something like a proper duplex, that might not be as much fun, but if you're going really minimal, and again for essentially a 430 gram tent, that is basically the second lightest tent I think that exists now, at least for a few months until they bring out some more light versions of their existing range. It's pretty exceptional. I did talk briefly about switching out from the X-mid Pro 1. Again, it's a gorgeous tent, the X-mid Pro. That welded seams and all the attention to detail with the zips and the tailoring of all the panels, it's fantastic. Personally for me though, I just found it a little bit too focused on the vertical walls, which ended up in wind actually being quite a bit of sailcloth for that wind to hit. And that sounds great having a tent that only needs 4 stakes, but in reality I think you're genuinely going to need 6 most of the time, because you really need to pull out the ridge line. With this tent, you're kind of pulling out the ridge line anyway by just setting up your 2 door pegs, which you can't avoid doing, otherwise you don't have vestibules. So you're kind of having the same amount of pegs on this that you would on an X-mid. If you do, like I will, guy out the extra guy line for the head, then you're going to have 2 more. So I'm going to have 8 pegs, but again, same with the X-mid. There's the option if you were in high wind and it was battering one of your walls, which was the situation I found, you're going to have to guy out those sides as well, which again, then you're using 8 pegs, so it becomes a bit of a false economy getting a tent that you can set up with 4 pegs when you're probably going to need 6 or 8 to do it. The other thing I found with the Durston was that there's so much tension under the ridgeline pegs either side that you probably want a much stronger V-shaped peg, or maybe like a Zpacks carbon peg. I, for 4,000 plus kilometers last, or 2022 on the PCT, only used little titanium shepherd's hook Zpacks pegs the whole time, in every circumstance. Managed to find spots in rock for them, on slab rock and in the sand, and used rocks to stack them up. And I kind of like that challenge of setting up a tent and spending a little bit more time, and again, only ever needed the shepherd hook titanium stakes. So I'm looking forward to going back to a more simple tent like this. The other thing with the X-mid, I found that it's not as simple. It's really well tailored. You don't have very long guy lines though at each of those 4 corners, so if you don't have perfect grout, you're kind of stuck, because you've either got to use rocks or extend your guy line somehow, and as soon as you extend your guy line, it throws off the setting a bit. It's actually quite a finicky tent to set up for just 4 pegs. If you've got perfectly flat ground, it's a dream. It's fantastic. But being that I'm going to use this one mostly for backcountry stuff in Canada, this is the tent I'm going to take on the GDT this July for 2 months. there's often small tent pads you have access to. We might be doing it with a couple of guys from Calgary who seem really awesome. We might have to share like one tent pad, possibly for 3 tents. So there's going to be an X-mid Pro and I believe Plex Solo and this now. So this is going to be the biggest tent, but it's actually only, I think, 3 inches wider than if I got the Ultraplex. It's just wider along the whole length. So certainly it won't fit quite as easily, but it's still, I would consider it still a one person, like most people use a regular width Zpacks Duplex, which I think is, about 5 inches wider than this. Most people are using that as a single person tent. And like me, most people are using a triplex for a 2-person tent. Just because you have that extra bit of room, you can put 2 25-inch wide pads in it. So depending on how this goes, I may sell the triplex on. If it's about 700 grams with the slightly thicker roof fabric. And you know, it's had a pretty good run of doing the whole PCT and a whole bunch of other trips, Cape to Cape and the Overland Track and all these more local Australian ones. So yeah, I think for the main reason for me, like I briefly touched on in the video, is that the Durston was fantastic, but it gave you a lot of vertical height in a fore-aft sort of aspect. So if you move around in your tent a lot forwards and backwards, when you're stuck in there for a rainy day, then that's great. I tend to move more laterally, and it's only when I go to sleep that I'm ever going to notice it being near my head. I don't really need that vertical room straight up from my head. And as you saw in the video, with a stick, it's really easy to guy out the head and the foot end. And also with this, it's wide enough that I can sleep a little bit more diagonally. The whole PCT I used a triplex, so I came from having a lot of space basically as a solo tent. My partner, she hiked about 800 Ks with me at the start, but then she got off for the rest of the hike and kind of visited here and there, but mostly I did the last 3,000 Ks by myself with a 3-person tent. It was fantastic. You could pitch it wherever you want. Just jump in and lay your mat however fit the terrain. The Durston tent didn't give you that flexibility at all. It was really only a couple of inches either side of a 20-inch pad. So you had to spend a lot of time getting the orientation of the tent perfect before you really guide it out. And sometimes I found that, with the triplex on the, when you're doing really long days, I could just pitch it on a space that looked roughly good and then jump in and find the nice flat level spot, move the tent diagonally, horizontally, whatever I needed to do to get a nice bedding spot in amongst that tent. So I'm hoping same sort of thing for this. I've got almost 2 pad widths worth of width in the tent to be able to angle my pad just to get a comfortable spot without having to then go out and reset up the tent. Last thing, the floor is a 0.75, so it is thinner than all other Zpacks tents to date. They all use the 1 ounce floor. But because I had the Durston with the woven floor, it was the 1st gen one, I was using my 3mm foam sit pad as a protective base layer for the tent. What that meant was as well, you could put that mat down, roughly find where was comfortable, and then just put the tent straight on top of it. And that was obviously added half an hour value worth of warmth, but more importantly, it added protection for that very light woven floor. So I'm going to keep doing that with this and just hopefully increase the longevity of the floor of this. I'm always really careful with my pitches. I clear the ground and that sort of stuff. But sometimes you might get lazy on a long 40-50 kilometer day and you just want to lie down. So I think this will give me a bit of flexibility. I'll put my 3mm foam pad down on the ground. It's only about 60 grams for I think 150 length, so 5 foot roughly by 50 centimeters wide. So it won't obviously cover the full floor space that this tent covers, but more than enough to be the high wear area where my pad will be. So hope you liked the information there. If you have any questions, feel free to message me in the comments and I'll answer what I can. I didn't see a video for this yet on YouTube when I went to buy it. And being that my hike for the GDT in Canada is coming up pretty quickly. It's still about 4 months away, but I did want to take this out and do some testing. So once I decided to sell off the Durston, I did it really quickly. I don't really like to keep multiples of similar items in my gear closet. I don't have that much money. And this in Australia ends up being about $1,000 Australian. I think it's 700, 670 US dollars or something like that. So it's not cheap, but it is very nice. And the feeling I got into this was one of real familiarity and comfort after having the triplex and spending hundreds of nights in that. Whereas the Durston, it was a bit stressful, feeling like a tall, narrow sort of coffin a little bit, even as beautifully made as it is, and as awesome a guy as Dan is. Just the aspect and the ratios of that tent were a little bit not exactly what I wanted. So hope you enjoyed all of the review. Again, have any questions, let me know, and I'll do another video from the GDT. I might even do some videos of some warm-up hikes before that. Thanks for watching.